Welcome back to Vul Vibes, everybody. The cybersecurity lowdown without all the, the lingo-induced headaches. Today, in the WPSA block, we're diving into a fresh batch of high and critical WordPress vulnerabilities. And for all you security folks out there, we know you're already fluent in MITOR, ATT, and CK, and you know all that jazz. So we're skipping the 101 and going straight to trend analysis. You're the pros, right?
That's right. We're going to be talking about the kind of trends that make security professionals like yourself raise an eyebrow and think, that's interesting.
Okay, so let's unpack this vulnerability buffet. Plugins are dropping like flies. And even a theme decided to join the party this time. Buckle up, folks, because this is where it gets interesting.
First up, we have a classic, injection vulnerabilities. It's back with a vengeance. The affiliate links plugin, which is handy for link cloaking and management, has a PHP object injection vulnerability. Now, on its own, this might not seem like a DEFCON 1 situation.
Yeah, it's like that suspicious-looking tuna salad in the back of the fridge. You know, it's bad news, but you're not quite ready to throw it out yet.
Exactly. But here's where things get spicy. If this vulnerability teams up with other vulnerable plugins running a pop chain, we're talking full-blown exploit party.
So it's like one vulnerable plugin is the lead singer, and the pap chain is the band, and the exploit is that concert that no one wants to attend.
A perfect analogy. It underscores a critical point that a seemingly minor vulnerability, when combined with others, can create a security mosh pit that you definitely don't want to be caught in.
For sure. Next up, we have that guest that never RSVPs but always shows up, CSRF, aka cross-site request forgery. This vulnerability is like that one friend who always crashes on your couch.
And refuses to leave. This time we have Shop Warden, Option Editor, and Reset plugins, all susceptible to CSRS.
Picture this. An admin innocently clicks a link that promises a lifetime supply of cat memes. Bam! They've unknowingly executed malicious commands on their site, all while chuckling at Grumpy Cat.
It's the simplicity and the effectiveness of CSRF attacks that makes them so insidious. And even though developers are well aware of this attack vector, they still make mistakes, which attackers are more than happy to exploit.
It's like leaving your front door unlocked just because you're popping out for 5 minutes. Opportunistic attackers are always lurking, ready to pounce.
And speaking of opportunistic attackers, let's not forget about our old friend cross-site scripting, or XSS. In this case, the Super Testimonials plugin is serving up a heaping helping of stored XSS, allowing attackers to inject malicious scripts.
Think of it like this. You leave a note on a public bulletin board. Except this note isn't about lost kittens. It's running malicious code every time someone looks at it.
And the damage from stored XSS can be extensive, from siphoning off sensitive data to defacing websites, and even redirecting users to malicious destinations.
So we've got injection vulnerabilities, we've got CSRF, we've got XSS. It's like a cybersecurity greatest hits album. But instead of catchy tunes, we have security headaches.
And to complete our vulnerability mixtape, we have cache poisoning. This sneaky attack often flies under the radar, but it can be just as troublesome.
Okay, spill the tea on cache poisoning. What makes it so sneaky?
Well, the Rapid Cache plugin, in this instance, has a vulnerability where it stores unsanitized HTTP headers in cache data.
So it's like that office fridge where someone brings in questionable leftovers and then everyone's lunch gets contaminated.
Precisely. Malicious data gets stored in the cache, and anyone who accesses that cached content is potentially affected. And the scary part is, cache poisoning can be a gateway to other vulnerabilities, like that XSS we were just talking about.
Talk about a recipe for disaster. And speaking of chains of bad events, let's not forget about local file inclusion and privilege escalation, the dynamic duo of web app vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. The Keep Official Opt-in Forms plugin has a local file inclusion vulnerability that, under specific server configurations, could allow for code execution. And we've also got GetBookings WP and CarSpot, both with vulnerabilities that grant attackers VIP access to systems they shouldn't be in.
So it's like an attacker sneaking backstage at a concert, and suddenly they're rocking out with a band.
And with privilege escalation, attackers can go from having limited access to becoming the headliners, completely taking over accounts and systems.
It's a stark reminder that even seemingly minor vulnerabilities, when chained together, can create a security breach worthy of a stadium tour.
And last but not least, we have sensitive information exposure, a vulnerability that's often overlooked, but can have major consequences.
All right, lay it on me. What's happening to the sensitive information exposure this time?
Well, the File Uploads add-on for WooCommerce is basically leaving sensitive data out in the open, like an unlocked diary on a park bench. It's storing this data insecurely in the Uploads directory.
Oh, so anyone with a bit of curiosity and Wi-Fi access could stumble upon this sensitive information. Not good.
Not good at all. While sensitive information exposure might not involve direct code execution, It can still lead to data breaches, identity theft, and a whole lot of legal headaches.
Wow, that's a lot to digest. It seems even common vulnerabilities are getting new and creative twists. Can't afford to get complacent, can we?
Definitely not. Attackers are constantly evolving their tactics, and we need to stay ahead of the game.
All right, let's take a quick breather, and then we'll dive into some key takeaways and trends we're seeing in these WordPress vulnerabilities. Stay tuned, folks.
It's a never-ending game of cybersecurity whack-a-mole, isn't it? As soon as we patch one vulnerability, another one pops up.
Right. It's like attackers have an endless supply of those stringy moles, and we're armed with a slightly worn-out mallet.
Exactly. But instead of getting frustrated, we need to use these vulnerabilities as learning opportunities. Each one provides valuable insight into attacker tactics and helps us build stronger defenses.
So let's put on our analyst hats for a moment. What are some of the key takeaways and trends you're seeing in this roundup of WordPress vulnerabilities?
Well, one thing that stands out is the sheer diversity of attack vectors. We've got everything from tried and true methods like injection vulnerabilities to more subtle approaches like cache poisoning.
It's like attackers are browsing the vulnerability buffet and sampling a little bit of everything.
Exactly, and this highlights the need for a comprehensive security approach. We can't afford to focus on just one or two types of vulnerabilities. We need to be prepared for the full spectrum of attacks.
So it's not just about having a strong defense, it's about having a diverse defense.
Precisely. And that brings us to another key takeaway, the importance of understanding attacker behavior. It's not enough to simply know about vulnerabilities. We need to anticipate how attackers might exploit them.
So it's like playing chess. You need to think several moves ahead and consider your opponent's likely strategies.
Exactly, and that's where threat intelligence comes in. By staying informed about the latest attacker tactics, techniques, and procedures, we can proactively strengthen our defenses.
So it's not just about reacting to vulnerabilities, it's about proactively hunting for them and closing those gaps before attackers can exploit them.
Absolutely. And speaking of gaps, let's talk about targets. Are we seeing any patterns in terms of what attackers are going after?
Well, plugins continue to be a popular target. They're like the shiny objects of the WordPress ecosystem, attracting both developers and, unfortunately, attackers.
It's true. Plugins add a lot of functionality and flexibility to WordPress sites, but they also introduce potential security risks.
It's a classic trade-off between functionality and security. We want our sites to be powerful and feature-rich, but we also need to make sure they're secure.
And what's interesting is that we're seeing vulnerabilities in both popular and niche plugins. It's not just the big-name plugins that are being targeted.
So no plugin is immune to vulnerabilities, regardless of its popularity or obscurity.
Exactly. Attackers don't discriminate. They'll go after any plugin that gives them a foothold in a system.
And that brings us to another important point, the human element. So many of these attacks rely on social engineering, or tricking users into taking actions that compromise their security.
Absolutely. CSRF, for example, relies on users clicking malicious links or visiting compromised websites.
It's a reminder that security is not just about technology, it's about people. We need to educate users and help them become more security aware.
Right, we can have the most sophisticated security teas in the world. But if our users aren't aware of the threats, we're still vulnerable.
So it's about creating a culture of security within organizations, where everyone understands their role in protecting sensitive data.
Exactly, and that leads us to a crucial question. How can we as security professionals stay ahead of the curve and protect our organizations from these ever-evolving WordPress vulnerabilities?
Well, that's a question we'll explore in more detail in our next segment. Stay tuned, folks. All right, security gurus, we've explored this vulnerability buffet, and let's be honest, it wasn't exactly a Michelin star experience. But how do we transform this security food poisoning into a robust immune system for our WordPress sites?
Well, the first step is admitting we have a problem, right? And that problem is often outdated software. Patching, keeping your WordPress core themes and plugins up to date, is like washing your hands before digging into that metaphorical buffet. It's basic hygiene. But so many sites skip it.
It's like leaving a sticky note on your front door saying, hey, attackers, come on in, the vulnerabilities are fresh.
Exactly, and attackers are constantly scanning for those open invitations. Patching is your first line of defense, but as we've discussed, it's not enough. We need a multi-layered security approach.
So patching is the appetizer, but what's the main course in this security feast?
Think of it as a security smorgasbord. Strong passwords are essential. They're like the bouncers at the door, keeping out unwanted guests. And enable two-factor authentication whenever possible. That's like having a security guard check IDs before anyone gets past the bouncer.
Oh, so even if an attacker snags a password, they're still stuck in the queue without that second factor. Makes sense. What other security dishes should we be piling on our plates?
Regular security audits are a must-have. Think of them as the health inspectors, making sure everything is up to code and no vulnerabilities are hiding in the kitchen. These audits aren't just about finding technical flaws, they're about reviewing your security policies and procedures to ensure everything's running smoothly.
Oh, so it's like having a fire drill, you know, making sure everyone knows the escape route in case of a security blaze. We can't forget about the human element, right?
Absolutely. Technology can only take us so far. User education is crucial. It's about training your staff to be security-aware chefs, recognizing suspicious ingredients and practicing good kitchen hygiene. Make sure everyone understands the threats and can spot phishing attempts and other social engineering tricks.
Yeah, so it's about creating a security-first culture where everyone in the kitchen is responsible for food safety.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final takeaway for today. WordPress security is an ongoing process, a constant recipe refinement.
Yeah, it's about staying informed, adapting to new threats, and always looking for ways to improve your security posture. So, dear listeners, as we wrap up this WPFFA block deep dive, remember to keep your ingredients fresh, your kitchen secure, and your staff well-trained. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and until next time, stay safe out there. 1337.